Welcome back to the deep dive. If you are a regular listener, you know we usually spend our time unpacking the latest in tech trends or maybe dissecting a historical biography or looking at the mechanics of the global economy. But
Today is a little different.
today we are zooming out, way out. We're leaving the day-to-day noise behind and looking at the biggest possible picture.
We are indeed wading into deep waters today. This isn't just a topic. It's the topic. It's the ultimate question.
We're looking at a head-to-head intellectual face-off between two complete competing worldviews. In the blue corner, we have Islam, and in the red corner, we have atheism. And we are basing this entire discussion on a very specific, very intense booklet titled Islam and Atheism Face-to-Face by Dr. Haytham Talat.
And face-to-face is really the right way to put it. This isn't a polite, let's agree to disagree kind of text. It doesn't pull any punches at all.
Not at all.
Dr. Talat frames this as an interrogation of reality itself. He's essentially putting the universe on the witness stand and asking it to testify about its own origins.
It felt like a courtroom drama when I was reading it. I mean, the tension is palpable. But here's the thing that grabbed me right away. Usually, when you see a religious text tackling atheism, you expect it to quote scripture, right?
Well, absolutely.
You expect, believe this because the book says so. And if you don't believe in the book, well, the argument just ends there. There's nowhere to go.
Exactly. That is the circular logic that usually shuts down these conversations before they even start. If the whole premise is the text is true because the text says it's true, you aren't going to convince any skeptic it's a non-starter.
Right. But Dr. Talat takes a completely different route here. He claims he's going to dismantle the very foundations of atheism using, and I'm quoting here, axioms of reason, logic, biology, and what he calls fitra, or natural instinct.
Yes, a natural disposition. He's stepping onto the playing field of the atheist, the field of logic and empirical science, and he's trying to win the game right there, on their terms.
It is a crucial distinction, isn't it? The text operates on the premise that you don't need to start with the Quran to prove a creator exists.
Not at all. You start with a light bulb. You start with a single bacterium. You start with the concept of zero. The entire argument is that if you look at the world strictly through a rational lens, atheism actually ends up requiring far more, blind faith than religious belief does.
That is a massive claim. I think for most people, the common perception is totally the other way around. Religion is faith, science and atheism are fact or observation. But this source completely flips the script. It says, okay, let's look at the math, let's look at the DNA, and then asks who has to make the bigger leap of logic.
And that is our mission today. We are going to unpack Dr. Talat's arguments step by step. And I just want to be really clear right up front. We are impartial guides here.
Absolutely.
We aren't here to preach, and we aren't here to convert anyone. We are reporters. Our job is to faithfully map out the logic, the biological challenges, and the philosophical traps that this text lays out for you.
We've got some heavy hitters coming up. We're going to talk about the logical trilemma, which sounds like a Robert Ludlum novel, but is actually about the origin of the entire universe.
We're also going to look at the minimum gene set, which I have to say totally changed how I think about something as simple as bacteria.
And the light bulb. Don't forget the light bulb.
Ah, yes, the light
I
bulb.
teased this in the intro, but somehow a regular 60-watt light bulb is going to explain why the human body couldn't just be an accident.
It is a surprisingly sticky analogy. It really is. But before we get to the biology, we have to start where the text starts. We have to start with the foundation, section 1, the logic of existence.
Okay, let's go there. So the source kicks off with a really fundamental question. It actually references a verse from the Quran, Surah At-Tur, but it treats it more like a philosophical puzzle than a piece of scripture. The question is, did they come from nothing, or were they the creators?
It is a simple question, but it serves as a kind of logical trap. Dr. Talat breaks this down into what philosophers call a logical trilemma. When you look at the universe, or even just look at yourself in the mirror, there are only 3 rational possibilities for how you got here. There's literally no fourth option.
Okay, let's walk through them carefully, because this is really the bedrock of the entire argument. Option number 1, creation from nothing.
Right. This is the idea that the universe, or you, or anything, just popped into existence out of absolute, total nothingness.
Yeah.
No cause, no raw materials, no pre-existing state. Just poof.
Which, intuitively sounds completely impossible. But let's play devil's advocate for a second. Is it logically impossible? People talk about quantum particles popping in and out of vacuums all the time.
That's a great point, and the source addresses that distinction. The text argues that even a quantum vacuum is something. It's a field of energy, it has potential, it operates according to physical laws. It's not nothing.
Ah, okay.
The text is talking about absolute nothingness. The mathematical axiom is that 0 plus 0 equals 0, always. If you have a state of absolute nothingness, no matter, no energy, no time, no space, no laws, nothing can ever come from it.
Because there's nothing there to do the creating. There's no potential.
Exactly. It's the classic rabbit out of the hat trick. If there is no rabbit, no hat, and no magician, you are never going to get a rabbit. The source's point is, if there was ever a moment in the distant past where absolutely nothing existed, we wouldn't be here talking today, because nothing comes from nothing.
So the text dismisses creation from nothing as rationally absurd. It violates the basic law of causality.
It does. A conclusion of zero.
Okay, so we cross option 1 off the list. It's mathematically invalid. What is option number 2?
Option 2 is self-creation. This is the idea that the universe created itself, or that human beings, as a species, created themselves.
Which sounds very sci-fi, doesn't it? A self-assembling universe that has a certain ring to it.
It sounds cool, but logically, it's a direct contradiction in terms. You have to think about the timeline.
Right.
To create something, you have to exist first.
Right. You have
to
to
have the power to act.
You have to be there to push the create button.
But to be created, you have to not exist yet. So for the universe to create itself, it would have to both exist and not exist at the exact same moment in time.
It's like trying to lift yourself up by your own shoelaces. It just doesn't work.
Or a mother giving birth to herself. It's chronologically and logically impossible. You cannot be the cause of your own existence because you weren't there to cause it. The action of creation requires a subject, a creator. If you don't exist, you can't be that subject.
Okay, so option 1 is out. You can't come from nothing because 0 equals 0. Option 2 is out. You can't create yourself because you'd have to exist before you existed. That leaves us with the only remaining door.
Option 3, creation by an external agent.
A creator.
Correct. The text argues that once you eliminate the impossible, whatever remains, however uncomfortable it might be for a purely materialistic worldview, must be the truth. There has to be an agent that existed before the universe, outside of the universe, that brought it into being.
Now, hold on. This is where I have to step in. Because the standard atheist response here isn't, I created myself or I came from nothing. The response is usually chance.
Right. It just
Right.
happened. A coincidence.
Yeah. Given enough time and enough randomness, isn't it possible that the universe just sort of fluctuated into existence? A lucky roll of the cosmic dice. Isn't that the leading theory in some circles?
Dr. Talat addresses this head on, and he actually gets quite aggressive with the logic here. He argues that chance is not a real explanation. It's just a word we use to hide our ignorance of the actual cause. But deeper than that, he presents what he calls the time and place rebuttal. This is a bit heady, so you got to stay with me on this one.
I'm ready. Break it down for me.
Okay. Imagine you roll a die. That is an event. For that event to happen, for the die to tumble through the air and land on a 6-foot, it needs two fundamental things. It needs time and duration for the roll to take place. And it needs a table to land on, gravity to pull it down, the die itself, which is matter.
Makes sense. You can't have an event without time and space. You can't have a football match without a field and a running clock.
Exactly. But here is the critical problem for the atheist view when it comes to the origin of the universe. The universe is the origin of time and place. Modern physics, through the Big Bang model, generally agrees that space and time began with the universe.
Before the...
There was no before in a temporal sense, and there was no here in a spatial sense. So the source argues you cannot use chance to explain the origin of the universe itself, because chance is a mechanism that operates inside the universe. It requires the pre-existence of time and matter.
Whoa. Okay. That is a bit of a brain twister. Let me see if I have this right. You're saying you can't use chance to explain the existence of the playground because chance only works as a concept on the playground.
Precisely. It's a fundamental category error. It's like asking, did the silence speak? Silence, by definition, doesn't speak. Chance, by definition, requires time and matter to function. If you were trying to explain where time and matter came from in the first place, you can't invoke something that needs time and matter to exist.
So, using chance to explain the Big Bang is like saying the football match created the stadium.
That is a perfect analogy. The stadium has to be there first for the game to happen. So for the author, the chance argument collapses because it puts the cart before the horse. It secretly assumes the existence of the very things, time and space, it is trying to explain.
That effectively strips away the "it was just a coincidence" defense. It forces you back to the original trilemma. You're left with those three doors again.
That is the entire goal of this opening section. The source frames this as the face of atheism, and this leads us directly into Section 2. Dr. Tellett argues that because of these logical dead ends, atheism isn't just a neutral lack of belief. He argues it is a positive belief system that forces you to believe in what he calls material miracles.
Material miracles. I love the irony of that phrase. An atheist miracle. It just sounds...
It is deeply ironic, but he lists them out to show just how much faith you need to be a consistent materialist. He says if you take God out of the equation, you are forced to believe in, essentially, a series of mathematical and biological impossibilities.
Okay, what are they?
Number one, nothing plus nothing. Something great. That's the universe. We've already shown how that's a logical problem.
Right, the 0 plus 0 equals 0 rule.
Number two, chaos plus time precision. This refers to the fine-tuning of the laws of physics, the idea that a random explosion resulted in the exquisite mathematical precision we see in things like the gravitational constant or the charge of an electron.
Things that if they were off by a tiny fraction, we wouldn't have stars or planets or life.
Not even close. And number three, which is where things get really tangible, dead matter plus randomness, life.
Okay, let's look at that third one for a moment. Dead matter plus randomness, life. Because that's usually where the debate gets the most heated. And to be clear, we aren't talking about evolution here, right?
Correct. This is a very important distinction. This is distinct from evolution. This is a biogenesis. Evolution talks about how life changes and diversifies once it already exists. This is asking a much more fundamental question. How did rocks and water and atmospheric gases, all non-living things, turn into the very first living, reproducing cell?
And the text argues that this is a miracle.
A statistical miracle of the highest order. The author points out that we, humanity, with all our collective intelligence, our billion-dollar laboratories, our supercomputers, we cannot create a single living cell from dead matter. We simply can't do it.
That's true. We can map the genome, we can clone a sheep from an existing cell, but we cannot take non-living chemicals off a shelf and make them alive.
Not even close. Yet the materialist viewpoint requires you to believe that blind, dumb nature, with no plan, no brain, no laboratory, no intent, managed to do it by pure accident.
It is the idea that a tornado sweeping through a junkyard creates a fully functional Boeing 747.
That is the classic analogy from Fred Hoyle, and Dr. Talat leans into it heavily. He argues that believing in that tornado, that random chance assembly of life, requires a level of blind faith that far, far exceeds the faith required to believe in an intelligent designer who planned it.
There was one more miracle on that list that stood out to me because it wasn't about physics or biology. It was about us. It was about our psychology, survival instincts, moral values.
Yes. This is the argument against purely evolutionary morality. And this one really hits home for a lot of people because it deals with our own experience of being human.
Yeah, so how does that argument go exactly? Because an evolutionary biologist would say, well, of course we developed morals to help the tribe survive. Cooperation is a massive survival advantage, right? If I help you, you help me, and we both live to pass on our genes.
That works perfectly for what we call reciprocal altruism. I scratch your back, you scratch mine. It makes perfect evolutionary sense. But the source asks, what about genuine self-sacrifice? What about a soldier jumping on a grenade to save his platoon?
Right.
What about dying for a principle? Like telling the truth when you know it will get you killed? What about valuing abstract justice even when it personally hurts you or your family?
Yeah, if I'm just a biological robot programmed solely to survive and reproduce, that soldier's action makes no sense at all. His genes just died. He failed his one and only biological imperative.
Exactly. Materialism, when taken to its logical conclusion, says we should be ruthless machines seeking material gain and survival above all else. But we aren't. We admire the person who sacrifices everything for a principle. We value truth and justice even if they lead to our own death. The text argues this moral compass, this fitra he mentioned, it contradicts the raw survival instinct. It is evidence of a higher law written into our very being that overrides our base biology.
So if that is the face of atheism, a belief in random miracles and contradictory morals, how does the source define the face of Islam? Because I think for a lot of Western listeners, Islam is defined by what they see on the news. It's a cultural label, it's the Middle East, it's a specific set of rules.
And the source strips all of that cultural and political baggage away. It goes right back to the linguistic root of the word itself. Islam comes from the Arabic root istislam, which simply means submission.
Submission to God.
Right. And the text emphasizes that this isn't a new religion that just popped up 1400 years ago with the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. Dr. Talat argues this was the universal message. He argues that the core religion of Adam, of Noah, of Abraham, of Moses, of Jesus, peace be upon them all, was Islam in this fundamental linguistic sense. They all caught submission to the one singular creator. That's Tawhid, or monotheism.
So the argument is that monotheism is the default setting of humanity, and everything else, polytheism, atheism, pantheism, is a deviation from that original innate understanding.
Yes, and he connects this directly to what he calls cognitive hunger.
I highlighted that term when I was reading cognitive hunger. It sounds like a very modern affliction, like we are all starving for something we can't quite name.
It's that gnawing feeling in your gut. The source posits that a purely secular or materialistic worldview leaves the human being feeling, well, dry. It tells you, you are stardust that woke up by accident, you're going to struggle for maybe 70 or 80 years, and then you will die and rot, and that's it. End of story. There's no ultimate justice, no ultimate purpose, no ultimate meaning.
Which is frankly pretty bleak. It's hard to get out of bed in the morning for stardust that rots.
It is bleak, but more importantly for this argument, the source claims it is deeply unsatisfying to the intellect. The human mind, he says, relentlessly asks 3 specific questions that define our existence. 1, where did I come from? 2, where am I going? And 3, why am I here?
And materialism answers, nowhere, nowhere, and for no reason.
Precisely. You came from a random chemical reaction, you're going to oblivion, and your purpose is whatever you make up for yourself before you disappear. And the text claims that Islam offers the coherent, satisfying narrative that feeds that hunger. Where from? God created you. Where to? You will return to God for judgment. Why are you here? To be tested and to worship. It gives a context to both the suffering and the joy in life. It turns life from a random, pointless accident into a deliberate, meaningful journey.
And this brings us to the concept of worship. And again, the text broadens this definition significantly. It's not just about the 5 daily prayers or fasting in Ramadan.
No, it's about connection. The text defines worship as a constant state of being. If you truly believe your purpose is to please the Creator, then every single mundane action can become an act of worship. Sleeping so you have energy to work honestly the next day. That's worship.
Studying to better understand the world he created.
That's worship. Being kind to your parents, smiling at your neighbor, removing a hazard from the road, all of it is worship. It is the framework that elevates every moment.
It effectively removes the waste from life. There are no throwaway moments.
It turns the mundane into the sacred. And that is a very attractive proposition for someone who is suffering from that cognitive hunger. It answers the why am I here question in every single moment of the day, not just on Sunday mornings or during religious festivals.
So we've established the philosophical groundwork. The trilemma suggests a creator is logically necessary. The face of atheism is presented as relying on a series of material miracles. But now the source shifts gears. It moves from pure philosophy to, well, to evidence. Section 3, Dalil al-Ijad.
The evidence of creation. Or more literally, the evidence of bringing into existence.
And this centers on a concept called the event, or hadith in Arabic. Now, for those who might know some Islamic terminology, hadith usually means the sayings of the Prophet. But here it's being used in a much more technical, philosophical sense, right?
Yes, that's a key point. In the tradition of Islamic philosophy and logic, kalam, the word hadith means something that is new, something that occurred after it did not exist, an occurrence or an event. Anything that has a beginning.
Okay. So how does this concept of an event prove a creator?
The argument is very straightforward, but quite powerful. Premise 1. Everything in the universe is an event. It's full of changes. Stars are born and then they burn out. Galaxies form and then they collide. On a smaller scale, mountains erode, atoms decay. The sun is losing millions of tons of mass every single second through fusion. Everything is in a state of constant flux.
Which means it's not static, it's not eternal, it has a timeline.
Exactly. If something changes, it is by definition dependent. It is reacting to something else that is being acted upon. And if it is dependent, it cannot be the first cause. The text says the universe practically screams, "I was made," simply because it is changing. If the universe were the eternal, self-sufficient God, it wouldn't change. It would just be an eternal, unchanging state.
So the very fact that the universe is aging, expanding, and decaying proves that it is an event. It had a beginning. And every event, by definition, needs an initiator.
Every event needs a causer for the cause. You can't have an infinite regress of events. Eventually, you have to get back to something that is not an event, something eternal, the uncaused cause.
And this leads us perfectly into the more visual analogies, because saying the universe changes can be a bit abstract for people, but looking at a light bulb, that's very concrete. This is section 4, Dalil al-Ikhwan, the evidence of precision or what? Perfection.
Precision, artistry, masterful design. It's all in that word. And this is the Paley's watchmaker argument, updated for the electric age. The source asks us to perform a thought experiment. It asks us to walk into a vast empty desert and find a light bulb lying on a sand dune.
Okay, let's picture it. You're in the middle of the Sahara, miles and miles of sand in every direction, and you look down and see a GE light bulb perfectly formed.
Now, Dr. Talat asks you to look closely. The light bulb isn't one simple thing. It is a system of interconnected parts. First, you have the filament, usually made of tungsten, which is coiled in a very specific way to glow white hot without melting instantly.
Then you have the lead wires, which have to conduct the electricity from the base to that filament.
Inside the glass, you have an inert gas, argon, or nitrogen. Because if there was regular oxygen in there, the hot filament would burn up in a millisecond. It would just flash and die.
And of course, you have the glass bulb itself, which is shaped to hold that gas in and create the vacuum. And then you have the threaded metal base to connect it all to a power source.
5 distinct, specialized components, all working together for a single purpose, to create light. Now, here's the thought experiment. Do you assume that the lightning struck the sand, turned it into perfectly shaped glass, hollowed it out, somehow filled it with pure argon gas, forged a tungsten wire from the minerals in the ground, and screwed it all together by chance?
No, you'd be locked up in a mental institution if you seriously thought that. It's a ridiculous idea.
But why is it ridiculous? What in your brain immediately rejects that conclusion?
Because it has a clear function. It works. The individual parts are useless on their own. The gas is useless without the glass to contain it. The filament is useless without the gas to protect it. They are arranged in a specific, non-random way to achieve a goal to produce light.
That is the definition of functional complexity. And the source pivots here to what he sees as the knockout punch. It says, you will never, ever accept that a simple 5-part light bulb is an accident of nature. But you are willing to accept that the human eye reading this text is an accident.
And the eye is infinitely more complex than a simple light bulb?
It's not even on the same scale. The author does the math, so to speak. A light bulb has 5 main parts. The human body has roughly 4 billion distinct cells, and each one of those cells contains DNA, organelles, molecular machines that are more complex than any factory we've ever built. Each cell is like a bustling city within a microscopic wall.
So the logic is one of consistency. If the simple man-made light bulb absolutely demands a maker, then the human body, which is exponentially more complex, demands a maker with even greater certainty.
To deny that, according to Dr. Talat, is to deny reason itself. It is to hold a bizarre double standard. You use your logic perfectly for the light bulb. Design requires a designer, but you inexplicably suspend that same logic when you look in the mirror. For yourself, you say, random accident. The source argues that this is a form of intellectual dishonesty.
And this idea of functional complexity, the idea that things need all their parts to be present and correct just to work at all, brings us to the most technical and honestly the most fascinating part of this deep dive for me, Section 5, the biological stumbling block.
The minimum gene set.
I have to look this up after reading the source because I didn't realize how cutting edge the science was. We are talking about the absolute floor of what it means to be alive.
We are, and this is where the theory of evolutionary gradualism hits a massive brick wall, according to the text. The central question is this: what is the simplest possible organism that can exist? How many genes do you need just to be considered alive?
And the source doesn't just speculate here. It cites a major study for this, the J. Craig Venter Institute.
Yes, J. Craig Venter, the famous biologist who was one of the first to sequence the human genome. His team did a groundbreaking study on a tiny bacterium called Mycoplasma genitalium. It's one of the simplest known life forms on Earth. And they wanted to see how many genes can we strip away from this thing before it just dies.
They were trying to find the 0 point of life, the absolute bare minimum.
Exactly. And after years of work, the number they came up with was roughly somewhere between 382 and 468 genes. Let's just call it 400 for simplicity.
Okay, let's pause on that number. About 400 genes. Now, that doesn't sound like a huge number compared to the roughly 20,000 genes that we humans have. But in terms of actual information, what does that represent?
It is a massive amount of information. 400 genes represents hundreds of thousands of base pairs of DNA code. It is a library of very specific, very precise instructions for building proteins and running the cell. It's not simple at all.
And this creates a huge problem for the accidental origin of life theory.
It creates what the author sees as a fatal problem. Because the whole theory of abiogenesis life, arising from non-life, relies on the idea that things started incredibly simple and gradually got more complex over eons. But this study shows there is no incredibly simple. You can't start with one gene and slowly build your way up.
Why not? Why can't you have a one-gene organism that slowly adds a second, then a third?
Because life is an all-or-nothing system. That is the key insight here. Think about what even the simplest cell needs to do to survive for even a few minutes. It needs to process energy, it needs to take in nutrition from its environment, it needs to repair its own cell wall, and crucially, it needs to be able to reproduce itself.
Right, all those basic functions.
So if you have the genes for processing energy, but you don't have the genes for taking in food, you starve and die instantly. If you have the genes for food and energy, but no genes for reproduction, your species goes extinct in a single generation. It's a dead end.
So you need the whole package. You need the energy team, the food team, the repair crew, and the reproduction team all on shift at the exact same time from the very first moment.
Precisely. You need all those 400 genes to appear simultaneously and in the correct order. You can't evolve them one by one over millions of years because the organism is non-viable. It's just a dead collection of chemicals until the full, complete set is there and functioning.
It's like a car engine. You can't drive a piston. You can't drive a spark plug. You need the piston, the spark plug, the fuel line, the crankshaft, and the wheels all assembled correctly before you can drive a single inch. Before that, it's just a pile of junk.
That is the minimum gene set argument in a nutshell. The source argues that nature cannot gradually build the first cell. It had to appear suddenly, with a massive amount of preloaded information already encoded in its DNA.
And the sudden appearance of a massive amount of complex information sounds a lot like
Creation, design, intelligence.
the source makes a really interesting and important distinction here between information and matter. I want to drill down on this because it's a subtle point, but it's central to the whole argument.
This is crucial. DNA, the molecule, is made of matter. It's sugar, phosphate, and 4 nitrogen bases. That's the chemistry. But the sequence of the DNA, the specific order of those A, T, C, and G letters, is information.
It's the code. It's the software.
The source uses the analogy of a book. A book is made of paper and ink. That's the matter. But the paper and ink did not write the story of Moby Dick. The story is information. It is an abstract concept that is distinct from the physical materials used to record it.
So saying that the chemicals in the primordial soup just randomly arranged themselves to write the genetic code is like saying the ink molecules in a bottle decided to spontaneously write Hamlet.
Exactly. It is confusing the medium with the message. The text argues that matter, dead, dumb, mindless chemicals, does not generate complex specified information on its own. It never has. We have never in the history of science observed matter creating a code.
So where does the code come from? Where does information originate?
Information, the source contends, always comes from a mind, a consciousness, and intelligence. If you see a complex code, you know there is a coder. If you see a book, you know there is an author. So when we look at the simplest living cell and find a library containing 382 specific genetic instructions, the most rational conclusion is that a mind placed it there.
It really does challenge the standard materialist view that life is just chemistry plus time. It reframes life as chemistry plus information, and the information has to come from somewhere outside the closed system of matter.
And that profound realization, the text argues, leads us back full circle to the feature, the final section of the book. When you realize the material world cannot explain its own information, its own code, you feel that cognitive hunger we talked about at the beginning. You realize the answers aren't just in the dirt and the chemicals.
Section 6 touches on this innate instinct again. The source says that deep down, every human being knows that idols and nature itself aren't the ultimate answer.
Because they are needy. That's the simple but profound word the text uses. It's a very humble word, but it completely destroys the idea of any created thing being worthy of worship.
How so? What does it mean for them to be needy?
An idol, a statue, needs you to carve it. It needs you to build a temple for it. It needs you to dust it off. If it falls over in an earthquake, it needs you to pick it back up. It is completely dependent on you, its worshiper. How can it be your God if it needs you to exist?
And nature. How is nature needy?
Nature is needy too. The sun needs fuel to burn. The earth needs the laws of physics to hold it in orbit. We human beings need air, water, and food constantly. We are all part of a system of dependencies. We are all needy. The fitra, that natural, untainted disposition, instinctively seeks the truly independent. It seeks the one who needs nothing, but from whom everything else receives what it needs.
It seeks the causer we talked about in the very beginning, the one who started the timeline but stands outside of it.
Exactly. The source argues that only through that connection submission to the one, independent creator, does the human soul find rest. It satisfies the intellect with the logic of creation answering the "where did I come from?" question, and it satisfies the heart with the purpose of worship answering the "why am I here?" question.
It's a powerful synthesis. We've gone from the hard logic of chance being impossible, to the functional design of the light bulb, to the irreducible complexity of that minimum gene set, all the way to the deepest hunger of the human soul for meaning.
It is a comprehensive argument. Dr. Talat is essentially saying, look at the universe with an honest, rational eye. Look at your own selves. Look at your own innate need for meaning and justice. All the arrows of evidence, logical, biological, and psychological, point in one direction. To ignore them requires an active effort, or, as he puts it, it requires a blind faith in the impossible.
It certainly makes you look at a light bulb in a mirror in a very different way. It forces you to ask that fundamental question. Am I just a collection of incredibly fortunate accidents, or am I a product of deliberate intent?
And that is the ultimate question of this deep dive.
As we wrap up this episode, we want to leave you with the final provocative thought that the source material presents. It's a question that really lingers long after you put the text down.
We talked about the minimum gene set, those 382 specific coded instructions needed for even the simplest known life to exist. The source leaves us with this final challenge. If matter is just dead chemicals and matter doesn't generate information on its own, then where did the software of life come from?
If the simplest living cell is a library, who wrote the books?
That is the question that you have to answer for yourself.
Thanks for diving in with us. We'll see you next time.